This is TWiT.
I suppose we can get right into it. Of course, as you know, we do have our stories of the week, and Abrar, you can kick things off.
I wanted to talk about the end of the Affordable Connectivity Program and the communities that it will impact the most. So this is essentially an FCC program that was designed to help more families and households get connected to the internet, because despite the fact that it is 2024, it's still something that a lot of people don't have access to. And basically the ACP gives a $30 discount to households on non-tribal lands, but then households that are on tribal lands get a $75 a month discount on internet service. And this is a huge help for people who, this is something that came out during COVID, and in 2021, this program was rolled out, and it's designed to keep people connected, but also to do all the things that we do online, right? Which is whether it's working or studying or connecting with people. And so a lot of these tribal communities and a lot of the 23 million households that are reliant on the ACP have, really depended on this, right? And have expected it to continue for years. It was supposed to be a long-term program. And now, a little over 2 years into its launch, they are running out of funds. And a lot of these households, all 23 million households, will lose this discount, which essentially makes internet unaffordable. And so I found this great article from CNN about how this will impact tribal communities in particular, because these are communities where it's expensive to build infrastructure, and a lot of these traditional ISPs don't really see the value in providing service to these smaller, more rural populations, because they say, what's the ROI if we spend all this money building all this expensive infrastructure and we only have a certain number of people who subscribe? And so these are communities that have been overlooked for so long. And, to add on top of that, okay, now a lot of these people have had the help that they need to get connected to the internet, and that help is going away. And so it's just a really great look at how this will impact not only small businesses and the ways that people work and learn, but just that connection. And I just think it leads me to reflect on all the things that we take for granted, right? We just assume we'll have access to all these platforms and people online because that's just how our lives have become. But this is something that a lot of people are going to lose, and it's going to be awful, honestly.
Yeah, I had not considered that the subsidies here would encourage ISPs to build in areas that they wouldn't have before. And it totally makes sense. Suddenly you have people who up to this point haven't been able to afford it. And so, yeah, you don't want to build in an area where you're investing a lot of money and you're not getting your return on investment. But to have suddenly a whole swath of customers available, that's an impact that I hadn't considered, because it's enough for me for the part where it's just a good thing. But I know that despite that's enough for me, it's not enough for companies in many cases. And so the whole time when I was thinking about these subsidies, I was thinking, why would an ISP go and build in one of these places? But yeah, everybody benefits here, because it means that they, from their capitalistic mindset, are able to make the money they want and see it as need to make. And also more people get more access. And, we continue to see, what we're doing right now, none of this, of course, would be possible without internet. And so much of what we do, so much of how we exist in this modern world relies on our connection to the internet. And to have huge swaths without access to it is already, but to provide temporary access to that and then take it away is even worse, especially because, as you pointed out, it meant that there were small businesses that were being able to be formed because suddenly you had access to the internet and you could, process payments and advertise and have something like Square, which is a service that a small business can kind of use to do management of their business and also take payments and everything, to suddenly have that lost. I mean, I hate the idea of people starting to rely on something and then that's something being taken away in general. And that's the big bummer with this. I mean, what is / can be done about any of this as it stands? Is there an opportunity for those funds that are running out to be refilled? And I just wonder why that's not happening.
It's a great question. And I think it's something people were holding on to hope for. That's something, that they would, be able to secure funding for this to continue. It seems like, according to this article, House Speaker Mike Johnson has kind of been the roadblock here in terms of not being willing to approve more funding for this. But there are some other efforts to introduce another funding bill that could keep this going. So maybe it's just a hiccup where for a while it disappears and then it eventually comes back. But you bring up a great point about the trust factor. And that's something that sources in this story talked about, where I love this. I just wanted to read this because I feel like it really paints a picture. The collapse of the ACP will become another stain on the U.S. government's centuries-long track record of breaking promises to tribal communities, because there's a precedent here of being cautious about, okay, do we trust that this program is here to help us, and if it is it going to stay? And it's no secret that, there's just a history of overlooking these communities. And so to give them something and then to say, never mind, actually, we're going back to where we started and you're just going to have to figure it out. That's just not an option. It shouldn't be an option to just do that. So it will be interesting if they do introduce more funding and they're able to renew this. How will people feel about it? I mean, there probably won't be the same sense of enthusiasm as there was the first time around of, okay, great, now I can, use telehealth services because I live so far away and this is something I can use. And, all these factors, it ties into so many things. And so I hope it gets funded again, but I also hope it's not another temporary thing where the rug gets pulled out from under these communities.
I also hadn't considered the fact that it meant access to telehealth services, which are often less expensive and in many cases provided in subsidized health plans in general, because the cost it's more cost effective overall. So to suddenly not have access to that, it's also telehealth. It's been my experience that ends up being one of the first ways that people are able to gain access to mental health services for the first time, and something that is more cost effective to them. All of that going away is just, it's not, it's very bad. And I think that there is a level of, unawareness, of ignorance. And I don't mean that in the sort of connotative way, but specifically in the denotative way, just not knowing, and the ignorance of those of us in the US who don't realize how many places in the US are still without internet or without affordable internet in their communities. Because, when you talk about bubbles, those of us who are online and participating in conversations have access to the internet and are talking to other people who have access to the internet. The people who aren't there aren't able to be part of that conversation and remind us that they are there. And so I think that plays a role in the kind of public's view on how important this is. And I wonder, if there were more campaigns or something that talked about the loss of access or the lack of access to internet online, if that could have some impact on this. Because, in the same way that we have regulated other utilities, and those are provided, and in many cases, there are lots of different subsidy programs and other cost-saving measures. The internet is not a luxury at this point. I could understand when it used to be. It is, at this point, a necessity. And everybody everybody everywhere deserves access to it, but at least here in the United States, everyone should have access to it. And that, that's what this plan aimed to help do. But to not make it something that was going to exist in the long run is very frustrating.
Absolutely. And not to plug my own article that I did recently, but I did write, I reported on a lot of these efforts to build municipal or publicly funded broadband networks in order to fill in the gaps that are left by a lot of these large private ISPs where they're not building in these rural communities as much as they should be, or if they are, the prices are, out of reach for a lot of communities. So what the communities end up doing is building their own fiber networks where they say, okay, well, if this is something that's publicly funded, then we can make the prices more affordable for people, but also create more competition. Because if we're a service and it's not just Xfinity that's available in the area, then they have to lower their prices if they want to lure more customers in. And so that has been really helpful for a lot of communities. Just to have that other actually attainable option. The roadblock there is there are about 24 states that have banned or restricted cities from building these networks. And, so there's a struggle here to make this process easier because it does help communities and it does help get more people online and not just make service affordable, but also just more stable. I talked to some people who said that they used to have they would pay for 2 different services. So if one went down, they'd have the other as backup, which is just ridiculous. You should not have to do that. But, hopefully efforts like that will also make this something, minimize this issue and slowly fill in these gaps. I mean, we've talked about the digital divide and the broadband gaps for so long, and it's about time we just figured it out,
Yeah, I agree. And for the record, you should always feel free to plug your stories because that's A, you have great stories, but B, that is part of what's awesome about having you on the show is that you can share some of the stuff that you're working on. So I appreciate that was included in this as well. Yeah. Thanks so much for watching this little chunk of Tech News Weekly. If you'd like to get the full episode, well, head over to twit.tv/TNW. There you'll find buttons you can click or tap to subscribe to the entire show in audio and video formats. Or just look in the description. We've got links down there as well.